This is No Operating Manual, a podcast about building healthcare companies when there's no one clear path and no operations manual. With decades of experience as a radiation oncologist at institutions like Moffitt Cancer Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and Beth Israel, Dr. Lewis Harrison recognized that even as oncology made extraordinary advances in treatment and diagnostics, the way information was delivered to patients had not kept pace. Patients were leaving consultations overwhelmed, confused, and unable to make informed decisions about their own care. So he set out to change that. Now Lou is CEO, president, and co-founder of MyCareGorithm. Lou, welcome to No Operating Manual.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We're going to jump into your experience. You spent decades as a leading radiation oncologist, and you've also been a cancer patient. Tell me about your professional and personal experience with cancer before MyCareGorithm.
Well, growing up, I realized that I was at a deficit with learning. When I was growing up, people didn't use terms like visual learning or things of that sort, but I knew that when I read things, I had to read them many, many times in order to understand it. And I finally understood it and I got it. It was an effort for me. And luckily, my mother and others that were teaching me realized that I needed more help. What became clear to me is that I was a visual learner, even though I wasn't labeled as such.
Mm-hmm.
If I saw a picture, or if I could create a picture in my mind, I immediately understood, I immediately got it. And of course, as I went through my medical school training, that sort of helped me when I spoke to patients, because I tried to help them make a visual picture of what we were explaining to them. As I progressed through my medical career, though, I realized that as cancer treatment and as the patient experience became more and more complicated, it became more and more complicated to explain things to patients in a way that alleviated their fears, overcame their knowledge gaps, and gave them the confidence and the trust that they needed. And so even early on in my medical career, I realized that we were not anywhere close where we needed to be in how we communicated with patients.
Have you found that in your experience, just as a patient, that communication is a barrier to other patient experiences?
Well, I think it's something that's important in life, right? We are communicative beings. And the success of our ability to communicate defines so much of our lives. It defines not only our professional life, it defines our social life. It defines our community standing and our community experiences. And so this is by no means focused only on cancer or the medical experience. Now, for me, having been a cancer patient, where this came into play for me is I had to go home and explain to my wife, my kids, my family, I had prostate cancer. And so there were different options of treatment. And there were even, should I get treatment? Should I not get treatment? So there were things that I had to explain to them. So I used MyCareGorithm tools to explain to my family what I had. I mean, I'm an oncologist, but I used it to explain it to them. In the same way that I envision that patients who have a consultation with MyCareGorithm can go home and explain to their family what's going on. So it came full circle for me, but it's been an interesting experience to see it from both sides. And I think it actually made me better. It's my experience helped me make our product better, if that makes sense. And listen, let's face it, in a world of business and interaction, nobody goes to a room to give a presentation today without slides. Nobody goes and explains something important to people without visuals. That just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't it happen? Because as the person explaining something, audience or to a person, the visuals make my ability to explain things easier and more efficient. And doctors and nurses need to be more efficient. In the audience standpoint, if I see pictures are explanatory to what the speaker is talking about, I'll understand it quicker. I'll understand it better. It'll stick, just like for a patient. the information needs to stick. So it's very translatable for that situation.
So for people who haven't seen MyCareGorithm, can you walk us through what a consultation looks like when a clinician uses it?
Absolutely. And basically what I like to tell people is it puts the music to the word. The song has lyrics and it has a tune. And if you listen to the words alone, it may make sense, and it's something that you could certainly appreciate. But what makes it come alive is when you combine it to the music. It gives it the life. It gives it the spirit. It gives it a certain beat.
Yeah.
In the same way with MyCareGorithm, it's basically the same words that a doctor, a nurse, professional would use when we talk to a patient, except those words have pictures associated with it. In fact, when we started, what I did, I taped myself doing consults. And I said to myself, what pictures would I need to show in order for my words to come alive? So in the beginning, when we talk about where your cancer is, we have an anatomical graphics that are easily understandable. And we can show, here's where your tumor is. These are the surrounding organs. This is how big it is. It's spread. This is how it's spread. This is your stage. All of it in pictures that accompany the words. So patients and their loved ones are glued to the screen, and you're sort of bonding and huddling over the visual. Once they understand what their situation is, well, the next thing is, well, what are your options? What are your treatment options? And so the next set of screens show the various steps of the various treatment options. And it's all visual, so they don't have to write it down. They don't have to take notes. They don't have to worry. They're going to remember all of this. They can just relax and pay attention to it because they get a copy of everything when it's all done. So you build the steps of option 1, option 2, option 3. Maybe an option is to go on a clinical trial, and you can show what that is. But those visuals all appear in a nice, easily understandable way. Also, there's a compare option feature, so you can help the patient and their loved ones compare the different options. And then for all of the diseases, there's something called the resource section. Whether it be breast cancer or prostate cancer or a brain tumor, there's an extensive resource section that has lots of pictures, lots of video on how treatment is delivered, what pathology is, what the drugs are, and what the side effects of the drugs, of radiation, of surgery, what the operations look like if it's surgery, what are we taking out, how are we putting it back together. All of those things, are there in pictures. And so there's a picture for everything, and hopefully at the end, when the patient is finished, there's a visual on what the next steps are. And then at the very, very end, you send all of this electronically to the patient so they can have a copy of everything they've seen, plus all the resources, and they can have it electronically, or you can print it out. So that accompanies them even after they...
So included with the discharge, basically putting this all together. Does that also live in their EHR?
At the moment, no, it lives independently.
Okay.
We didn't want to be to one or another EHR when we created this product, because there are a lot of EHRs out there. Now that we've created the product, and now that the product is starting to be in use at centers around the country, our next step that we're working on as we speak is integrating it into the EHR. But this is not dependent upon the EHR, and it lives independent, like Amazon. Like you can sign on to Amazon or Delta Airlines, or you name it. And you can sign on to MyCareGorithm, you're a patient, and you have your login, all your information.
So your pilot with Moffitt Cancer Center showed some pretty remarkable results. 100% of pancreatic cancer patients said that MyCareGorithm consultation was better than any other prior medical consultation, which 100%, that's pretty incredible. Can you share more about that pilot and any other pilots that you've done and what you've learned along the way and how that has changed or impacted the product?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, about 10 pilots have been completed so far, at about 6 major cancer centers around the country. We've been very, very fortunate to have pilots done at Moffitt, but also at NY, at University of Virginia, Rutgers, Columbia, New York, at Mount Sinai in New York. And all of our pilots, we've sought to assess the tool's value to patients, caregivers, and providers. So for patients, the questions were, understand your diagnosis better? Did it help you understand the treatment options better? Would you sign on and back at it and home? Did it give you more confidence in your treatment journey? Did it give you more confidence in the provider? And at Moffitt, one of the questions was, if you decided to seek further care at Moffitt, will the use of the tool factor into your decision or influence your decision? And 100% of the patients said yes.
That's amazing.
And 75% of the patients said it influenced them greatly. They actually, the power of the tool in influencing the decision was very, very high. And that's been true in other pilots as well. The University of Virginia, in their pilot, that was a prostate cancer pilot, they asked patients to compare the consultation they had at the University of Virginia using the tool to recent consultations they've had for prostate cancer that didn't include the tool. And was it better at various things I've mentioned, explaining the diagnosis, explaining the options, giving you confidence, reducing stress? And it almost uniformly for patients and caregivers, the answer was yes, and a resounding yes. And so these are very encouraging data. Now, for providers, the questions are different. Did it enable you to bond with your patients? What did it make you more efficient? Because the efficiency of the doctors and the nurses and medical team is a key ingredient today. And of course, for institutions have a social mission, but they also have a financial imperative.
Yeah.
They need to have revenue. How do institutions have revenue? By retaining patients. So if a patient comes to me as a doctor, they stay at my institution to be treated by me, that's a financial value, quite frankly, to the institution. And so measuring patient retention, that's what we call it, is an ingredient. It's a factor that's valuable to the institution. And in all of the centers that have measured patient retention to date, patient retention numbers have been quite high. So there's something in it for patients, caregivers, providers, and the institution. So that's what we like to sort of categorize as the new standard of care.
It just seems like beyond oncology, beyond showing where your cancer is, there just seems so many applicable ways in all discharge paperwork to implement something like this to help people understand cardiology, or they get diagnosed with diabetes and they basically are walking through a minefield of information and processes that they now need to go through, that if you walked through something like MyCareGorithm, then you would have that information at your fingertips and not only be able to understand it, but also be able to share it with people so they understand better if they weren't in the room with you, with that practitioner, that clinician.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, we will be starting soon our first foray in outside cancer, to your point.
Awesome.
And it's going to be orthopedic.
Okay.
Another very visual thing.
Yeah.
You've hurt your knee, you've torn a meniscus, you've broken your kneecap, you've sprained your ankle, you've hurt your shoulder. We're going to focus on sports injuries. And in fact, we're going to focus on sports injuries in children and adolescents and young adults. You know, in that situation, it's also very visual, what your injury is and what we're going to do to fix it, what you have to do to rehab afterward. And quite frankly, an additional challenge, which is interesting, is if the child is 10, 12, or 13 years old, there's a level at which the explanation has to be pertinent and understandable to a 13-year-old, to his or her parents as well.
Yeah.
So you've got two different age groups, and it's important that both understand. And so that's an interesting twist. on that, and it's something that we're looking forward to doing. But you're right, cardiology, emergency medicine, kidney, neuroscience, in all of these areas, the concept of complex information being to frightened patients is the same,
Yeah.
and it needs to be managed.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. You went from being a senior physician in oncology to a startup founder. What was that transition like? And what surprised you most about building a health tech company?
Well, I like to joke with people that instead of retiring when I was 65 years old, I started a company to guarantee that I would not leave my professional journey without experiencing the height of human aggravation. Because starting a company is a unique experience. Yes, throughout my career, I've practiced oncology. I've had various leadership roles, and moving to a completely new experience. But this was the only way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I wanted to change the conversation, I had to move over, start a company, create a tool, and do all the things now. And I've learned a lot about the difference between functioning as a medical sector or executive or a physician versus starting a company and needing to develop products and having customers and listening to customers and adapting and pivoting and doing things that we do in medical treatment all the time, but it's in a different context. So it's been a humbling experience. It's been a learning experience. And in many ways, been exhilarating, and in some ways, it's been a reality check on the hard truths of life in business. And not everybody is altruistic as I would hope they would.
Tell me about the makeup of MyCareGorithms. How big are you right now? I mean, I would consider you a medical education company, right? So how does that fit into, or maybe you aren't, maybe that's not how you're considered at all, but tell me about how that fits within kind of the healthcare ecosystem and how you've built your company to serve that purpose.
Well, I like to talk about the journey of a startup company. And one of the challenges a startup has to acknowledge and deal with is you're a different company every year.
Yeah.
So just to use the metaphor, in the beginning, when you have an idea, you're creating a product, you're a product development company. And you need to bring together the expertise. So we brought doctors and nurses from around the country to help us develop the tool. And so beginning, you don't have sales force. You don't have, you just need people that will help you develop the product, and software folks and medical experts, etc. Well, once you've developed what we call the MVP, minimal viable product, the company morphs. You're not a product. You still are developing product and evolving the product. But the next step is testing the product in the market. So you're approaching it, you're showing them your need, you're signing up and to want to use the product, into the idea of what you're doing, and to partner with you. So that's a whole different skill set and a whole different type of individual that you need working in the company to do that. And conduct the pilot studies and you see the results, and we're fortunate that all of our pilots are positive. Well, the next step is going to market. Now, all of a sudden, you need a sales force. You need people that are focused on customer success. And in the feedback loop of customers give you feedback, the product better, you retest it. So the company has continued to change and evolve, even through the short couple of year lifespan we've had, as we've moved from product development to where we are now, which is beginning to emerge, commercialize.
With your pilots, how do you sell through? What is your go-to-market with your product?
In general, what we have today is use our network of experts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having been in the field for a while, I know lots of people in the country, so I can call a colleague who's a leader at this center or that campus, show it to them, and they see it, liked it. And then, okay, now let's talk about how we can work together. And so in the beginning, you're really starting with the network of your own,
Yeah.
around the country.
Yeah.
And you get started. They like it, they use it, they start to see good results. And then over time, you scale and you commercialize. And that's sort of where we are. We're at the point where we have an initial cadre of institutions, and we're doing two. The institutions that we're working that have an agreement with us, there's a cohort of doctors doing it. They may have 20 doctors, but like to get 100 doctors at an institution. So there's expanding our current client base that can go from within, land and expand. Right? And the other, of course, in a continuous flow of people and introducing places, either through a growing network, attending national, or doing other things, word out.
I just saw on your website that you partnered with Think Foundation on thyroid cancer. And
Yes.
As a clinical partner, how do you make those choices in where you go with those clinical partners and how you partner with them?
Well, I'm fortunate to know these people, and I've known Medical Leadership Foundation decades. Dr. Moffitt, who's a very well-known head in New York, and Dr. Michael Tunnell, who was a very, very well-known endocrinologist in New York, thyroid cancer specialist, two of the major worldwide leaders of thyroid cancer. They worked with us to develop the thyroid module in MyCareGorithm, and they have tremendous amount of insight and knowledge and touch for what the patient and what the caregiver and what the physician needs at their fingertips for a successful thyroid. So it's an honor to the two of them. Of course, the Bank Foundation has a menu of activities that engage the thyroid cancer community around the world. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for us to engage that community, hopefully a wonderful for that community and early access.
Yeah. Part of that was the quote from the Think Foundation, basically saying that MyCareGorithm redefined the standard of care for cancer. So how does that feel to be able to say, okay, we're evolving how cancer patients are treated for, at least in this case, for thyroid cancer?
Setting a standard for how we talk to people, so medical profession, was very, very exciting. Frankly, was the main purpose of doing what we're, before this company started, my partner in this, Hank Piscicano, who was a grateful patient, and that's how our relationship started. We developed a prototype multimedia tool for neck cancer, which is my specialty. And I used this tool in my clinical work for over a decade, way before we started. I developed this tool. I could do a better job with my patients. I didn't develop this tool initially as a commercial vehicle, as a product in a business. I developed it as a doctor wanting to do a better job for my patients.
Yeah.
And Frank funded it philanthropically, to help me, to help us in New York, with his for our patients. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that we said, there's nothing like this out there. I saw the power of using this tool firsthand. I was, in my practice, and other of my colleagues were using it as well. We said, you know what? There's something here that we can create that would be very impactful. And that's when we decided, you know what? Let's start a company and let's bring this to the rest of the world. So that's how it started. But it started really with me just wanting to do a better job, and Frank wanting to philanthropically help us do that.
Yeah. Kind of how you started and why you started this. Was there any clinician that modeled that kind of care for you when you were coming up as a new doctor?
I can't say that there were. Yes, I think Sadly, but truthfully, what was modeled more for me than anything else was how inadequate they were. Explaining things to people with words that just went over their heads.
Yeah.
Leaving people dumbfounded and desperate, after a consultation, but with no choice to agree, okay, have the operation or whatever. I was moved more by the gap that existed than seeing an excellent example of success, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That's what motivated me.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to an oncologist who's skeptical that a tool like this can create meaningful change in that 15, 20-minute consultation?
Next time you give a talk, I'll bring your slide.
I'll be there. Don't worry.
Talk to an audience and explain what you want to tell them without pictures. And see if that works for you. See if that makes patients more efficient, and see if the audience understands what you're saying. And better yet, next time you go to listen to a talk, shut your eyes and just listen to the words the person is saying and don't look at the slides. And see if that helps you understand what the speaker is saying and see if it sticks.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any argument not to use visual learning tools in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
There may be an argument that I don't want to learn new things, or I don't want to change my style, or I'm too busy, or perceive themselves as too busy. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But there is no argument that holds water using a visual learning tool in does anything to help the explainer and the listener. Make sense?
Yeah. That totally makes sense. As a visual learner, yes, absolutely. So you're an accidental founder, I would say. This wasn't something where you're like, I'm going to be a founder. This is my career path. What advice would you give to founders who are starting new health tech or even cancer-focused health tech companies?
Well, you've got to believe in your product. You've got to feel like what you're doing is going to matter. And if you feel what you're doing matters, then you're going to be committed to finding a way to help it succeed.
Yeah.
Now, you have to be able to conceptualize, and you'll need other people to help you. You'll need folks, you'll need administrative folks, you'll need the menu of people that good making business successful. You'll need people to help you conceptualize how to commercialize it and how to take a good idea, make it a good business. There's a million good ideas. If it's a good idea, it's not a good.
Yeah.
And so there's a distance to travel between good idea and good business. And people who have a business mind and a business head are helpful to you. Now, I'll tell you in healthcare, there's a unique challenge because a product like ours is most focused on the patient. But the patient isn't the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
It's also focused on the provider, the doctor. Now, the doctor is also not buying the product, although the doctor is using the product for the patient. The institution is not paying for the product. So they're a little bit separated from the heart and soul, the moment of sitting in a room with a caregiver. So you got to appeal to all of those in order to succeed. And that's why in the about the patient, the provider, the institution.
Yeah.
It's got to be something in it.
Yeah.
I would love it if everyone just cared about the patient. Wouldn't that be great? You see something that works for the patient, I want it. I'll buy it. Wouldn't that be great? Unfortunately, there are people out there like that, and there are institutions out there like that. Few and far between.
Yeah. But if the product is patient focused and is making a difference in how well that patient gets and how they adhere to maybe a cancer protocol, then I would say that's a pretty good indicator that that institution is going to buy in. But yeah, it should always be patient first, but it isn't always, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's true. Even those that say they're patient first, it's not always the case.
Not always the case.
That's just the truth.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I will say about being in this business, if you will. That's one of the things that disappointed me, that when there's something that's so clearly beneficial to patients, that obvious fact is not enough. That's reality. I've learned that. I don't live in the delusion that that's enough anymore. We have to appeal to patients, providers, institutions at some level. We'll have to appeal to insurance companies, perhaps, and even others.
Yeah.
But that's how we will succeed.
Yeah. Lou, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience and your founder journey. I really appreciate you sharing your personal journey as well. And I look forward to seeing what MyCareGorithm does in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Darren. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and congratulations on the success of your podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to No Operating Manual. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and a review, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. No Operating Manual is hosted and produced by Aaron O'Brien of Chemistry, a healthcare marketing and communication advisory. Visit our website at choosechemistry.com.